The second to last Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting podcast is now live. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. The class of 2022, at least the first part of it for Penn State, is in the books, and a brand new class of 2023 commitment is in for James Franklin and his staff. Ryan, happy holidays to you. Happy holidays to our listeners. It's hard to believe a year that feels like it took about 6 years to complete is almost in the books, but here we are on December 21st. It's almost time to turn the calendar to 2022, but we have a lot to get to first. How are you doing this week? The Outback Bowl is creeping upon us, but as we all know, there's a new commitment in for Penn State as well. Josh Miller, the class of 2023 offensive lineman who visited Penn State often, had a top five that included North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Clemson, and obviously I think Clemson to most people was a close runner-up, but he picks Penn State on Monday. Felt like a decision long in the making that finally just took place. Let's start there. How's it going? And what do you make of this commitment from Josh Miller in the class of 2023, Penn State's fifth?
Well, first off, Merry Christmas. And that you bring something up. We have another one next week. I'm supposed to be in Harrisburg next Tuesday, so now it's all coming to my mind right now. Oh man, how am I going to fit that in?
I'll be flying to Tampa next Tuesday, so there's a weird. There's a very good possibility we're going to have to figure out a way to record something a little bit later this week or a little bit later next week.
Yeah, I got to figure that one out. We'll figure that out off air. But Josh Miller. It wasn't a surprise that he committed. It was more so it just kind of popped up, and I guess we should have seen it coming. I mean, so word started to leak over the weekend, and Josh he admitted that he committed on Saturday to Trautwein and Coach Franklin. So, again, not a surprise that he committed.
And just politely didn't ruin our Saturday. He waited till Monday when we were all back and ready to go. There's always signs with these guys when you know they're going to be good, and that's one of them. Maybe not, being a little bit facetious there, but yeah, we certainly will take it. Go ahead.
Yeah, salute, Josh. Thank you for that. It was nice to have a weekend that was pretty quiet, so appreciate that, Josh. But yeah, man, again, somebody I've had crystal balling for them for a long time now. So no real surprise that he committed. Important player for Penn State, I guess you'd say that. They definitely need to add solid linemen, whether it's interior or as at tackle, and he's long been considered one of those top 3, 4, 5 guard prospects. After, of course, Birchmile had already committed. So important get for Phil Trautwein. This was somebody he had at the line. I mean, he was committed. Everybody was telling me that it was done at the end of October, and even Josh went on to admit that he pretty much told Penn State it was done, and then of course he holds off. Josh saying Franklin rumors didn't impact him. I don't really believe it. Sorry, Josh, if you're watching this, man. I just find it hard to believe that on November 2nd, those James Franklin rumors did not impact him, at least a little bit from holding off when he did. But a good pickup for Penn State, man. Another Virginia pickup. They're on a roll in Virginia, and that's a good sign, especially they're going to need it down there with Brent and all those guys down there. Now that'll be interesting to watch moving forward.
Yeah, Brent Pry, of course, now at Virginia Tech. Tyler Bowen rumored reportedly to be joining him there at the end of the Jaguars season. I have to imagine he can't get out of Jacksonville soon enough, so I'm sure that marriage will be made in due time. Another very good recruiter on Brent Pry's staff, and they have some other guys there as well. J.C. Price is a good recruiter in that area. So, yeah, Penn State and others.
I was surprised they didn't keep Ryan Smith.
I was too. That was interesting to me. He, of course, is the former Penn State graduate assistant. He ends up at Northwestern, which definitely, and in the same position too, as my dog starts barking. But yeah, that was surprising to me too, because certainly you would assume that Ryan Smith was going to be in a good place to stay there. But you know what? Sometimes these things just don't work out, Ryan. It's the way these coaching searches tend to go.
Yeah, it's tough to know really what's going on behind the scenes, so I don't want to overthink it too much. But you just thought with the connection, and I know Ryan Smith still has a good connection with Penn State. That's somebody who, I've talked to Penn State sources about before. I mean, there's definitely, he's friendly with multiple people on that staff. So that just surprised me a little bit. I thought he would definitely be sticking around Virginia. But anyway, let's get back to Penn State. What do you want to talk about? 2023 alignment, where we go from there?
No, I want to take this conversation a couple of different
Okay.
places first. The first one being that Penn State now has Alex Birchmeier committed, as you mentioned, in this class. Josh Miller, of course, committed in this class. It's not crazy to think Matthias Barnwell, currently rated by On3 as a 4-star tight end, could maybe grow into an offensive lineman one day. That's not an absurd thought. Either way, a lot of the conversation, and we're going to get into it a little bit when we talk about the class of 2022 later on, but a lot of the conversation on our Lions Den message board and elsewhere has been about whether or not Penn State has recruited and picked up commitments from enough offensive linemen over the last few cycles. Where do you stand on that? You can't really discuss this without noting that Nate Bruce was a part of the class of 2021. He ended up leaving Penn State. He's now at Lackawanna and trying to work his way back to college football, but they left him with just Landon Tangwall along the offensive line in this last class. Certainly the numbers aren't great, but as you wrote last week, Penn State also needs to be and will be very aggressive in the transfer portal at that position, but can they do enough there to make up for what is really not a whole lot of numbers at that position, especially, and we'll get into it as we get into the 2022 group, but Andre Roy decommitting. Can they make up with the numbers situation they have now with the transfer portal?
What is there? Is there number 11, 12 scholarship? I wish I had their number in front of me there. I know it's a little lower than what they
It's
want.
more than at linebacker for the Outback Bowl, which I think is down to just Tyler Elston, Charlie Catcher, and Curtis Jacobs, if I'm not mistaken. After Ellis Brooks opted out Monday night, but that's here nor there. That's not the point. But yeah, I think you're right. It's in the 11 to 12 range. Yes.
Yeah, I believe that's what it is. But I mean, here's their misses the last couple of years. I mean, these are all important misses. We'll start with Nolan Rucci, who, my God, Nolan Rucci, just that miss looks bigger than ever before. And Wyatt Malone, of course, he was a big miss. Tristan Lee was someone who showed interest in Penn State early, and then kind of midway, we realized that's not happening. Diego Pounds had a foot in the door. I mean, he was committed, and then a late change.
Do you still have that commitment story on your computer, by the way? Does that still exist?
No, I only because I only have a 250 gigabyte hard drive. It probably would be, but all the videos we record and whatnot, I got to clear that bad boy out every couple months. But then 2020, man, Michael Carmody, Anton Harrison, Grant Toutant, Aaron Parks, of course. I mean, Grant Toutant and Aaron Parks were both committed and then decommitted. And, whether they would have been great, not, it's tough to really say. But Josh Fryer, too. Josh Fryer, I think, is a pretty good prospect. But I don't want to, we can just sit here and name names all the time.
Sure.
I still think last year was tough to really grade Trautwein as a recruiter. I think 2023 will be a good time to do that. I think 2023 will absolutely be the best opportunity to really know how Trautwein is as a recruiter, and right. So far he's looked really good with Josh Miller and of course Alex Birchmeier. So yeah, I mean they needed to get a tackle in 2022, and they're going to still keep pushing for one. We can talk about it down the road. I mean, I don't really have any updated names at the moment. I know they're scouting guys. What I keep kind of hearing is just that it's incredibly bare bones, I guess. And then not only that, but like the handful of guys who, are probably legit, everybody's just going to storm after him. So I'm not really.
And we're talking transfer portal at that point, correct?
Well, I was talking 2022.
Okay, I mean, 2022.
They're both the same way. They're the exact same thing.
That's more the
one guy,
right?
Yeah, the one guy with the transfer portal is definitely Hunter Norzat, I believe. I hope I pronounced it right. Hunter, I apologize if I butchered it. But the Cornell right tackle, who will probably be a guard if he were to come to Penn State, but he's incredibly important. I think he's Penn State's number one transfer target, basically at any position right now. And I don't know if that's completely true, but I do know that every time I ask about him, my response is this guy's incredibly important, and we're making progress. So we'll keep an eye on him. Like I said, Cornell prospect. I know he likes what they've done with Eric Wilson. I've had a couple just texts with him. I haven't had in-depth talks with him, but they're working hard on him, working hard on Mom, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, let's move on then to what can happen in the class of 2023 as it relates to Penn State possibly making additions. We, of course, like we noted, have 2 offensive linemen already in this Penn State class who we've discussed, and there's more out there. You saw one recently play in the state championship in Pennsylvania. There's some other ones out there. Let's roll into that next. Who should Penn State fans be keeping an eye on now in the next cycle along the offensive line?
Mm-hmm. With Javen Williams, of course, that's who you're referring to. He's incredibly important. I think he's more of a guard, though. If I'm being honest, I don't. He's listed as a tackle, but just the more I talk to Penn State people, I get the impression they like him more as a guard. And of course, when you have Josh Miller, and don't get me wrong, they're still going to push very hard for him. But if you have Josh Miller and you have Alex Birchmeier committed, landing Javen, which that's a hell of a pool there. But landing him would fill out your interior excellent or put it in an excellent position. It's that tackle spot again, man, that is going to be so crucial. And right now, I mean, it feels like to me, it's all about Chase Besantis, Evan Link, Luke Montgomery, Samson Okunlola. I'm sure somebody else will emerge. They always do. We got a year to go, but if you're telling me there's 4 guys to focus on, or you're asking for 4 guys to focus on, those are easily the 4. And I just think Evan Link's incredibly important because he's the one who's been on campus multiple times. He's the one who consistently seems to be coming to Penn State and not going to other schools. That's the big difference between him and Luke Montgomery. Luke Montgomery has been here a couple times, but he's been all over. He's been to Michigan multiple times, Notre Dame multiple times, Ohio State multiple times. If I had to guess with Hunter or with Luke, I would think Ohio State or Notre Dame. I mean, either of those two make sense there. And Penn State's probably 3rd, 4th, maybe, probably 4th or 5th, if I'm being honest, because Michigan's probably in there too with him. So
right.
Chase Besantis has been terribly hard to read lately. He was a guy who 6 months ago, I was like, yeah, Penn State might get him. And now I'm just like, is Penn State really in it with him? I don't even know. And then Samson Okunlola, I mean, anyone who followed his brother's recruitment, Samuel, he didn't visit anywhere, and then he just committed to Pitt the other week. And I know they're at Thayer Academy, they're away from their parents and stuff. But I'm hoping Samson learns some things from his brother's recruitment, because I think not visiting places really hurt Samuel, because I know at one point Penn State really liked him. And I know I'm getting off topic a little bit, but I hope Samson's able to get out and visit more schools, whether it's Penn State or elsewhere, because it just shows you, if you wait and you don't go, especially in the summer when you had to be aggressive and all that stuff, I think it really hurt his brother. But the main point here is just got to get Evan Link. I'll circle back to that. The Gonzaga prospect's incredibly important. Land Javen Williams, then you'll have 4 solid guys. I'm sure they'll try and fill in another tackle if they can find quality.
So I believe the last offensive lineman Penn State recruited there was Richie Pettibon. Is that right? Who ended up at
From
Alabama?
Gonzaga?
Yeah.
Well, no, Olu Fashanu.
Oh, that's right. Yes, correct. The last one that they landed was Olu. Yes, yeah, right. The last one they landed was Olu, and the last one they did not was Pettibon. That's correct.
Usually I'm the one on the opposite side of that. Like, oh my God, how did I forget that guy? So I don't know how that popped in my head. I'm happy it did. But yeah.
Well done. Yes, a very talented member of Penn State's class of 2020 that, to me, has every reason to see the field next year. But we're not talking football. We're talking recruiting here on the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. You heard a little bit there about what Penn State is hoping to do in the class of 2023 along the offensive line now that Josh Miller is in. Let's end that conversation with this. Is this exactly how James Franklin would prefer most recruitments play out, in terms of having a guy who visits a lot, be ready to commit, but maybe it was the coaching rumors. Maybe he just wanted to be sure that he wasn't going to commit too early and then decommit down the road. But he takes his time here. He visited Penn State more than anywhere else. The On3 recruiting prediction machine was far and away pointing to Penn State
89%.
For the longest time, yes. And quite frankly, it probably could have been 99%. But at any rate, that's not how the algorithm works. But the point being that Penn State was in the driver's seat here for quite some time. And instead of rushing this, which Josh Miller certainly could have, he instead took his time, make sure he saw and heard everything he needed to. I believe a Clemson visit was the last one he made prior to seeing Penn State and then now committing.
Yeah. I would think, that's. But look, let's see how it plays out. We got a whole year to go. I mean,
sure.
If he decommits and things change, then it's different. But like, as far as I'm close to a commitment, I'm right there, but I'm not 100% there. Yes, James absolutely would prefer that. I think a lot of coaches would. I mean, they don't want guys decommitting. They want to make sure you're all in. And James talks about that all the time. They'll double and triple check on guys to make sure they're.
What's the balance there, though, in terms of not upsetting a recruit and his family when they want to commit and you say, tap the brakes a little bit, make sure you're 100% certain of this. Is there a balance there or no?
I think for guys who commit incredibly early, like Jerry Cross, for example, like there was, they absolutely.
Is Barnwell an example of that? I mean, did
No.
he want to commit
So
early?
there goes my point. You just dropped the nugget on that and blew that up. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point. I just, yeah, I mean, I guess there really is. I mean, if you use the Matthias Barnwell example, it's hard to argue anything else. But I mean, I assumed that they said all the right things to Matthias, and
Right.
asked him to double check and triple check, and I'm sure he said all the right things back. And at some point, you can only double down, triple down, quadruple
Sure.
down as many times, and
So
you
you're
got
out of
accepted,
money.
right?
Well, wait, that's
But
not a poker
yeah,
reference, right? Yeah.
I mean, I will say at least with Matthias compared to Jerry, Matthias visited multiple times before committing, where Jerry
Right.
Cross committed and then didn't visit for like 6 more months, and then Jerry Cross still only been on campus one time.
Right.
That was his official visit, and that was it. So I'm just trying to cover my ass there now after you blew that up for me. But but yeah, no, I mean it's there's no, it's like I say with everything, it's always gray, right? There's no black and white to this.
Sure. All right. Well, we're about halfway through this edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. And when we talk about the class of 2023, Josh Miller is the most recent commitment, but there is somebody in this cycle who would put out a message on social media on Monday indicating his recruitment may be getting closer to being over than most people thought. Ryan, walk us through that.
Got the hiccups, bud.
It was a little bit of a
Sorry.
bad, yeah. Sometimes when you do these transitions, your voice wants to stop and you don't, and you keep talking, and then you get that come out. Yeah,
We're having fun with this. All right, yeah, Andrew Rappleyea, tight end out of Milton Academy. He's originally from New York. Milton Academy is in Massachusetts, I believe, but. So yeah, I mean, I have a story on Andrew, and look, I mean, he's not putting out who his top schools are, but he did admit that Penn State's his top school, or one of his top schools. Let me double down on that one. They're definitely going to be, top 5 or so. I'm not sure how many schools he's going to announce, but here's the most important thing. His last 2 major visits were aside from Michigan, who has not offered him yet. I do believe he went to a couple schools during the season, but he's visited Penn State twice. He just came to Penn State in November 23rd, I believe. And then when you look at some of the other schools, like who have recently offered, like Ohio State, Wisconsin, he hasn't visited either of them. And they'll probably make his top schools. I know he's spoken highly of Wisconsin. But the thing that he's telling me is that he's thinking about making a decision in January. So when you add all these things up, he's been to Penn State twice. He hasn't been to some of these other top schools. I mean, unless it's going to be like Boston College, which I'd be really surprised with, I'm pretty confident it's going to be Penn State here. So I haven't put in a pick yet, only because I just interviewed him. And I still sometimes, like after I just interview a guy and I put a pick in, I don't think that's sometimes fair to the player. And I do want to dig more. Obviously, I don't think a commitment's coming in the next couple of days. Like he says he's going to have a top school here or top list of schools, and I do believe that's coming. But I mean, all signs are pointing to Penn State right here, right? I mean,
right.
I don't see any way that that's not. And they will take him, yes. I mean, the whole Matthias Barnwell could be a tackle thing. That muddies the waters a little bit, but he's absolutely still a take. He told me that having those guys committed isn't an issue. He connected really well with Brenton Strange and Theo and Tyler Warren during a more recent visit. I mean, there's a lot of things here that add up. Ty Howe has been recruiting him incredibly hard, and they've spoken very good about that. He's spoken very good about that relationship with Tyler. So, I mean, everything I'm adding up here screams Penn State. Let's see. Let me just dig a little bit more over the next week or two, and I can maybe give you a better answer.
Penn State has 2 tight ends currently committed in Joey Schlaffer and Matthias Barnwell. But again, Barnwell could be an offensive lineman at the next level. He could be a defensive lineman at the next level. We don't know yet. He could be just about anything at this point.
Defensive lineman is one thing that somebody at Coastal Penn State's been bringing up to me more and more. And I don't think the whole staff is in on that, but I think there are some people in Lash who are thinking about that more. I think the whole thing, though, is just Matthias really wants to play offense. I think that's kind of what I've gathered is they don't want to push that too hard because Matthias seems to really be interested in tight end and, even more so tackle than defensive tackle. But we'll see.
Which is a tremendous transition to our class of 2022 recap. Penn State signing a number of players during the early signing period. One guy they did not sign, we'll get to him in a second, but I want to start with Christian Driver and Mekhi Flowers. 2 guys who maybe at one point in the process, like Matthias Barnwell, really seemed adamant about playing offense at the next level. James Franklin telling us last week that both of them are going to start their career on defense. And I think that numbers at safety probably play a role in that, but I think also just the way those two play probably plays a big role in that too.
I think Penn State wanted Christian Driver to be a safety for a long time, and they got too involved in that recruitment and liked him too much an athlete as an athlete. And also, let's not overlook how close James Franklin appears to be with Donald Driver. And I'm not saying that's why Penn State took him, but
right.
I mean, there is a very good relationship. I mean, they are very friendly. Donald Driver spoke to the team before the Cotton Bowl a couple years ago. I mean, they're friends. And so I think, they weren't going to push too hard on that if Christian really wanted to be a wide receiver. And look, he's a solid wide receiver. I just don't know if he's fast enough to keep up with some of the other wide receivers Penn State has brought in. And you can get away with not being a burner at safety if you play smart, you play the run well, you have good pursuit routes, you tackle well, all those other little things, which he apparently, from what we see from the outside looking in, he does. But the news of Christian Driver being a safety was something that perked my ears up, because for the longest time, Christian was all about wide receiver, and that's what we were writing about. And we always kept saying we expect him to start his career here, but could see it finishing over here. And, for the staff to admit then that Christian's going to start as a safety, I thought that was one of the biggest takeaways. Makai, of course, I kind of already was getting more and more of a drift that he was going to be a safety. The talk for him wide receiver was way back in the spring, and then that died out pretty quickly. And if you just watch Makai, man, he is absolutely a safety. I mean, he lays the wood. He's pretty smart. There's a lot of things that scream that he'd be a really good safety prospect. I mean, the guy can play the run really well. That's the 3 or 4 times I watched Makai Flowers, I really took away of this guy's almost could be a linebacker if he had a couple more inches. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the numbers play a role there too. I mean, Penn State is not extremely deep at that position from a class scholarship distribution standpoint. And you're assuming, we don't know, as we talk about this here on Tuesday, December 21st, we don't know that Jair Brown will be coming back to Penn State for the 2021 season, but he's given off some pretty strong hints that he will, and that's going to help Penn State a lot. But Keaton Ellis is getting...
They need him to be back.
Career. Yeah, no kidding.
Sorry to cut you off. They need him back.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, Keaton Ellis is getting deeper into his career. Enzo Jennings and Tyler Rudolph, 2 former 4-star recruits who have not played much at Penn State or in the transfer portal. The future looks bright with Jalen Reed, with Sakeet Wheatley, and some other guys. But, yeah, numbers there are important. So to get those 2 guys on that side of the ball, I think is a big win for Penn State. It wasn't a big win with Andre Roy, though. He flips to Maryland on signing day. You had been tracking this inside the Lions Den forum, which, of course, you can find at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Just $1 if you're looking for a late holiday gift. Let your friends, family know about it. Sign them up for Blue, White, Illustrated, and On 3. $1 for 365 days of access to our insider articles and more. You had been tracking this inside the Lions Den forum, Ryan, that Andre Roy, things were starting to get a little bit dicey with him leading up to signing day. And then pretty early on Wednesday morning, his national letter of intent shows up at Maryland. They announced him as a signee, and that was that.
Yeah. I was tracking it really well, huh? I thought it would be USC, so I did a great job. No one knew what was going on with Andre Roy. I mean, God, how many times we talked about this? I mean, it was just like Jayshon Barham, just like Derek Moore. I mean, the St. Francis guys are so hard to really get a good grasp on. I mean, I'm trying to build a relationship with St. Francis guys now they're 2024, just so I get a foot in the door. This is like a learning experience for me. But, I mean, look, when you look at what happened with Jayshon Barham, and you look at what happened with Andre Roy, it's pretty hard to not think that was set up. And I hate saying that. I don't know whether that's Loxley setting that up or if that's the St. Francis kids setting that up. But, yeah, I don't think it's a good look, personally. I mean, I like Masai. I like a lot of the people at St. Francis. They've always been really good to me. But I don't know. Maybe it was Loxley. I mean, I've had a couple people mention that they think that was Loxley pulled the strings on that one. I have no idea. I really don't. But it's hard for me to think that Jayshon Barham and Andre Roy were not connected. Go ahead.
Yeah, ultimately it doesn't matter, but it does go to show that recruiting and signing day and everything else can still be crazy, even in 2021.
Love it. Travis Hunter, how awesome was that? So,
it
was a lot of wild stuff.
Yeah, Travis Hunter flipping the number 1 player in the country according to the On3 consensus rankings, flipping from Florida State to Jackson State on National Letter of Intent Day, the early signing period. Yeah, there can still be surprises, Ryan. We've come a long way since the days of fax machines and everything else, but there are still surprises every single year. And for Penn State, it was Andre Roy. For Florida State, it was Travis Hunter.
Did that $1 million deal with Barstool actually work out? I don't even know. Like, is that true? Have you
according
seen
to
anything on
Deion, yeah, I don't know if it is. Deion Sanders did a tremendous job of playing that off and saying that, how could he coach someone making $1 million and his son's not even worth $1 million and blah blah blah. So we'll see. I don't know if that actually ended up coming to fruition or not. But I mean, look, it's a valid point. Whether that happened or not because of NIL, it is going to happen at some point in a more, I would say, open way. Whereas this was all speculation with Travis Hunter. I think at some point, maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's 5 years from now, I don't know. At some point, some recruit or some coach is going to make a mention of this NIL stuff on signing day, and it's going to make news, and it's an area Penn State has to improve. I don't think there's any argument to be made there.
James Franklin made that very clear on signing day. He was asked about it multiple times, and he made it clear. Andy Frank made it clear. I mean, just about everybody who was asked about it made it clear that there are a lot of ways they need you guys. They need the fans to pretty much step up and learn. I mean, I think the quote from Andy Frank was pretty much, "Hey, there's been," I'm totally paraphrasing here, but it was basically, for the longest time, fans have wanted to help us recruit, and now's your chance to really help us recruit. Right. The thing that so many fans don't want to hear is you got to recruit because you got to hand out your own money. That's pretty much how it works by advertising and stuff like that. So, of course, 95% of the people on Twitter, they check out on that. But, hey, speaking of Andy Frank, though, I do want to get into a couple quick things here before we end this. We get to speak with Andy Frank at the end of the signing day every year.
And I think it's always one of the more enlightening things of signing day. No question. This is a guy that, before you get into it, for Penn State fans who may not know, director of player personnel at Penn State, Princeton grad, longtime confidant of James Franklin, longtime builder of James Franklin recruiting classes. He plays an integral role in what you see on the first Wednesday of December or previously the first Wednesday of February every single year. Go ahead.
He's the guy who does all the when there's 150 guys at the whiteout game, he's the one making sure it all goes smooth. And it's a really hard thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a whole recruiting staff and whatnot, but he's just the one at the top of the ladder that, has to check every box off. And, it's an incredibly hard task to do. And, from everything from official visits to all these other different things, he's the one who really kind of sees the things behind the scenes. But he had three. I wrote a story on this the other day. He had three things that really kind of grabbed my attention. The first was just that Penn State really believes that the transfer portal is going to become a major form of recruiting in regards to both the offensive line and the defensive line moving forward. And that's not really a surprise. I mean, he flat out said, look, if you're trying to fill holes, it's a lot easier to do that with an experienced player, regardless of really the level in college football, than filling it with a high school player, which makes complete sense, right? So I just think that's. I mean, he flat out said that we're going to be going for offensive linemen and defensive linemen almost every year when the situation presents itself. So I thought that was interesting, especially because of how much talk offensive line recruiting has gotten recently. Another thing was just talking about staff sizes and growing. I've been doing some research on this. And we're talking about recruiting staff sizes. We're not talking about offensive analysts or defensive analysts, just recruiting staff. Penn State has 8 members of their recruiting staff. And I spent probably almost too much time trying to figure this out. But a lot of the main schools out there, they have anywhere between 12 and 15. And when I say main schools, I'm talking about the Georgia, Clemson, Alabama's, LSU's, the schools that Penn State's trying to recruit against, those SEC powers with more money, quite frankly. Right. And I just think it's interesting. Andy didn't say anything that was out of the box or anything. I mean, he made it clear that they want to continue growing. They have to continue growing.
And they have grown to some extent. Yeah. And
they have.
That's important to mention, too. Yeah, right. They have.
But they need to keep growing. And obviously Franklin just did this contract extension. There's believed to be money in there for personnel. And I guess what I'll be curious to see is Penn State able to add 2 more recruiting staff members over the next year? Because I really get the sense from talking to people that they want to get up closer to 10. I mean, 12 would be lovely. I don't think that's realistic, but they definitely want to grow their recruiting staff. And Andy, hinted at that, didn't say anything confrontational or anything like that, but he made it clear that that's something they need to keep growing. And then just one other thing I really want to hit on, which is extending those on-campus private workouts. Anyone who followed recruiting this year, especially in the summer, knows that 2022 players were able to work out with coaches one-on-one for the first time ever. And, normally it always had to be in a camp setting and player has to pay for it. It's a set day. And now, players are able to come up on any given day that worked for them, have an hour-long private workout with one or two coaches on the staff. It was able to be recorded then, so recruiting staff could review it later or whatever. But
right.
Just Andy has been very outspoken that he wants this to continue. And he's not the only one. I mean, I know if you just kind of pull this up and you can look for other people across college football, they have been really pounding the table for this to continue. And I wouldn't be surprised if the NCAA does. Just from talking to people behind the scenes, I do believe that this is something that will probably get continued. It needs to be continued because it benefits the player. It benefits the coach. There's no reason to not continue this. It makes it more hectic for me. I got to try and figure out who's doing individual workouts every June, but there seems to be a lot of momentum behind continuing that, and I think it's a good thing because if not, as Penn State, as James Franklin said this week, or excuse me, I think Andy said it in his press conference, Omari Evans and Tyler Johnson would not be part of this class if that rule did not exist this year.
Yeah, and it's a good one. I mean, again, part of what COVID took from us, there's also some things to take from it, and things like this are one of them. There's no question. And look, I don't think any of us want to relive what we have over the last 2 years to a large extent, but there are some things from the electronic side of things, from this visit flexibility side of things, that college football should be adopting without question. And we heard James Franklin say he's going on to the board of the American Football Coaches Association. That is run by Todd Berry. It has a very big influence on kind of how things work. It's not the end-all, be-all by any stretch of the imagination, but he is now going to be in position to have a say on the board of this organization. Now, look, it's a coaching majority, right? I mean, he can't make anything unilateral, but he's in a powerful position to make his voice heard about some of these things. And quite frankly, a lot of them are things that should have already been in place in the first place. But we needed COVID to get those, and they should absolutely keep them moving forward.
Well, Manny Diaz said that, he's really respected James and of course, it's his introductory press conference. He's going to say good things about his new coach. But he brought this up kind of on his own the other day about how he only knew James from afar, but going to these conferences and hearing James's opinion, he grew to really kind of respect James and, said that he stands for a lot that's right in college football. Again, he's now his boss, so I expect him to say good things. But I just thought that was interesting because I don't really think he was prompted to ask why, how he knew James, and he got into the AFCA and those meetings and just kind of getting to know him from a distance and so forth.
All right.
So,
Ryan, any final thoughts here as we wind down this edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast? The holidays are almost here. We hope our Blue White Illustrated listeners, readers, and everybody else enjoys them, and hope you have good times with your families or however you end up spending them. Ryan, like I said, it's almost the end of 2021, buddy. We got the Outback Bowl to go and one more podcast, and that's about all that's on our agenda. What's on your mind here as we close things out?
I'm set for San Antonio. I booked my flight for that. That'll be fun. Going down to see the All-American Bowl with Drew Aller and Nick Singleton and Denai Dennis Sutton, Keon Wiley. They're all set to go there. So we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. But other than that, man, just hope everybody has a good Christmas. It's been a fun year. Dude, I can't believe we've been doing this for 6 months now?
6 months now.
I don't know, 6 months. That was wild. That was fast. We appreciate everybody for subscribing. Really appreciate those who subscribe to the website for $1. Please, the dollar's generally going to run out here soon. They've been extending it for us for the longest time because it's been successful, but it is generally going to end soon. So if you want to get on it now, you'll have it all throughout next year, signing day. It generally would be a good time if you're ever going to jump on it. But hey, just appreciate you guys subscribing, man. You guys have been awesome to us, and just thank you for that.
BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, on3.com. We are going to wrap things up here on this edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. We don't know when we will come to you next, but we will do so before the end of 2021. So check us out wherever you get your audio, Apple, Spotify, Google. Anywhere else you find podcasts, you'll find us. You can also get us on YouTube. All of T. Frank's daily videos, youtube.com/Blue White Illustrated. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. We will talk to you next time on the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast.